Let's again jump right in and talk about this data to change process. And I want to tee it up and set the stage for the balance of our time together. In short, data exists in these systems. And I want to call out that these data are largely transactional. In other words, the systems were implemented to create or improve a certain process. That process could be recruiting, it could be learning, performance, comp, any number of things. However, it was not created, more often than not, to generate insight. Thus, we have to understand the limitations of that data. Despite this, we're taking it and we are staging it, in other words, cleaning it. If we have different data coming from different data sets, we have to, and the term is not well socialized, but help just run with me on this, is stage it. Stage it for me means actually put it in the proper rows and columns, put it in a cube that actually makes it workable. So what does workable mean? It's like, it's structured in a way where we can actually analyze it. So the data is consistent through a row or column in a very basic sense. And now we can create charts and do analysis, run structural models on it and what have you. But that is all predicated on staging the data within one system. From there, we can do analyses, we can run reports, we can create dashboards and what have you. To do more advanced analytics, of course, there are much better tools than there were 15, 20 years ago to do this, but still, it takes crafting. It takes a specialist to understand the appropriate analytical technique to apply to solve a given business problem. From there, the analytics isn't enough. We still have to package it and communicate it. And that is an art in and of itself. Oftentimes, the people doing the analytics don't have the skills or background to actually craft that messaging and put it in a compelling deliverable that actually goes downstream. Even once we have this deliverable or product that exists on a dashboard or some technology, we still have to put a narrative around it. We have to communicate it. We have to facilitate discussion, provide recommendations. At the end of it, this is going to an internal customer and they are going to take some action. So what has happened over the course of time? We have all this knowledge embedded in an organization. Some of it is good and appropriate. Some of it is frankly not. And we're trying to use it in ways that it's ill-equipped to be used. And I'll mention that a bit later. Despite that, action is being taken all the time. Leaders are making decisions. They don't often wait for this data. Obviously, best case is that they have the appropriate data at the appropriate time. Oftentimes, life doesn't work that way. Things have to happen fast. And if we don't have the systems and processes set up beforehand, then we cannot respond as people analytics teams to the need. At the end of it, many organizations, even with COVID-19 and these three big realities that we're dealing with, are struggling between generating this knowledge and actually affecting change downstream. The good news is we have, with these crisis management teams that have been spun up, we've actually gotten better at it. And people analytics has played a key role in facilitating those discussions because we have the COVID-19 data in many cases relative to where the workforce is, relative to where the risks and hotspots are related to the virus. So with that insight, we've elevated our influence in many cases. And in other cases, and I'm going to speak about this at the end, we've just fallen off because we have not been able to provide that level of insight. In other words, if we don't understand where our employees are relative to where the virus is most prevalent, where it's growing, then we're not going to be in the conversation. They're going to go, leaders that is, are going to go get that data, those insights from somewhere else. So whatever we do, we have to do it at speed and at scale. So when I first started this work in the early 2000s, it was very transactional. In other words, there was a business problem. We went out and got all the data that we can get our hands on within reason, came back, did analyses, created a deliverable, communicated that, and that was event-based. In other words, it was not scalable. If we wanted to repeat it, we'd have to go through the whole process again. Maybe we had some learnings, maybe we had the data staged already, but fast forward, we now have to have these data structured in a way that's accessible all times. And it takes work. And there are tools that are adept at making that happen. I won't go through the list of tools right now. Just know that they're out there. And if you want to learn more about what they are, you can visit our website or reach out to me, and I'll gladly share a short list depending on your business need. But at the end of the day, not only do we need that data on demand, we need it at scale. Because if we're going to truly enable the organization, and we're going to talk about this in the analytics maturity progression, if we're going to enable the organization, others are going to have to access that data set and do their own analyses. Again, there's privacy and certain rules that are going to have to be applied, certainly. However, we have to think about how we're going to scale the technologies and the data and insights that we're producing. Only then can we create a culture of data-driven decision-making around the workforce and the people within it. So as we wrap on this particular theme, I wanted to introduce this early on because this is what's happening that I see. With COVID-19, there's been a lot of talk about return to workplace. That is not going to be appropriate in many organizations. I would go so far as to say most organizations, particularly here in the United States. And even if we do return to workplace, it's going to largely be an ebb and flow. In other words, we're not going to be back to work and that's it. We're going to maybe go back. If the virus ticks up in this geography, we're going to have to retract. Many organizations like Google just came out and said no return to work until July 2021. That's fantastic in that it provides workers clarity, and they can in turn deal with that reality, particularly over the next 10 months or so, 10, 12 months. And that's roughly the duration of the school year. So if workers have kids in school, now they can plan and learn how to deal with that. So the data and insights that we're bringing to leaders as people analytics professionals needs to shed light on the risks and opportunities inherent in that reality. That overlays with diversity and inclusion, which we'll talk about. It overlays with the fact that productivity and workload management needs to be considered given the distractions of the work at home model. So given this, if we don't have this data to change process, not only visible, because we have people upstream and downstream from where we're doing our work. Because if you're an HR business partner, if you're an executive, you can understand what's happening before you get that data. If you're a technologist, you can understand what happens downstream and how it needs to be staged so it can actually be usable. So again, this takes governance, it takes work. And the good news is I'm seeing more organizations get after it in a systematic way. The downside is there's still organizations who don't get it, who are trying to just piecemeal together some insights on an ad hoc basis, and they're really struggling as a result. So I don't want you to struggle. So hopefully this helps, and we're going to talk more in a couple minutes right after this commercial.